The Cursed Tomb of Timur. The summer of 1941 was a time of chaos, with war casting its shadow over much of the world. In the midst of this turmoil, my name, Elena, an archaeologist drawn to the secrets of history, became forever entwined with one of the most chilling tales of terror. It all began in Samarkand, a city rich with legends and haunted whispers, where I became captivated by the mysterious tomb of Timur, the 14th century conqueror. Timur, known for his brutal conquests, was a figure both feared and revered. His tomb, hidden beneath the Guri Emir mausoleum, was said to be cursed. The locals spoke of a dire prophecy: whoever disturbed Timur's final resting place would unleash a disaster upon the world. This warning, dismissed by many as mere superstition, intrigued me. Accompanied by a team of Soviet archaeologists, we set out to explore the tomb, despite the ominous legends. The air was thick with anticipation as we descended into the dark, narrow passageway leading to the burial chamber. Every sound echoed ominously in the confined space, heightening my sense of unease. Inside the chamber, a sense of foreboding hung heavy. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings depicting Timur's conquests. At the center lay a stone sarcophagus, its surface etched with ancient symbols and dire warnings. The atmosphere was oppressive, a silent reminder of the power and wrath that lay within. Driven by the lure of discovery, we pried open the sarcophagus. A cold wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing our lanterns and plunging us into darkness. I heard distant whispers, as if voices from beyond the grave promised vengeance upon those who dared disturb Timur's sleep. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath our feet. The earth seemed to awaken, angered by our intrusion. In the chaos, I glimpsed something moving in the shadows, something ancient and otherworldly, lurking just beyond the reach of our light. Panic set in as our team scrambled to escape the collapsing chamber. We stumbled through the darkness, guided only by the faint glimmer of moonlight filtering through the cracks above. Emerging into the open air, gasping for breath, we were left with the chilling realization of what we had done. 3 days later, the news broke: Nazi Germany had invaded the Soviet Union. The timing was too coincidental, and whispers of the curse spread like wildfire, linking our ill-fated expedition to the horrors of war. But I knew there was more to the story. Secrets buried deep within the tomb had only begun to unravel. Haunted by the events of that night, I realized that the true horror had only just begun. Something had been unleashed from the depths of Timur's tomb, something that defied explanation, a darkness that now shadowed our every step. Determined to uncover the truth, I spent countless nights poring over old texts and manuscripts, desperate to decipher the symbols and warnings we had found in Timur's burial chamber. My only ally in this quest was Dr. Viktor Petrov, a historian who shared my fascination with the supernatural. His eyes were haunted by the knowledge he had uncovered in his own research. "Elena," he said one evening, his voice low and urgent, "there's more to this curse than we realized. Timur's tomb was designed not just to house his remains but to trap something within." His words sent a chill down my spine. "Trap something? What do you mean?" Dr. Petrov handed me a faded manuscript, its pages yellowed with age. "This is a record from the time of Timur's burial. It speaks of a dark force, a spirit bound to the conqueror in death as it was in life. A force that must never be released." The implications were terrifying. Had we unknowingly unleashed this malevolent entity into the world? As I studied the manuscript, a plan began to form in my mind. We had to return to the tomb, to seal whatever we had awakened before it could wreak further havoc. Gathering our courage, Dr. Petrov and I made our way back to Samarkand. The city was tense, its people living in fear of the encroaching war. But the greater fear lay beneath the surface, in the shadows of Timur's resting place. As we approached the mausoleum, the air was thick with an oppressive energy, a palpable sense of dread. The entrance to the tomb gaped like a dark maw, its depths hidden from the light of day. We descended once more into the darkness, our footsteps echoing in the silent corridors. The burial chamber was as we had left it, the sarcophagus still open, its secrets laid bare. Yet there was something different in the air, a presence that seemed to watch us from the shadows. The temperature dropped, and I shivered despite myself. Dr. Petrov lit a lantern, casting flickering light across the chamber. "We must perform a ritual," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "A ritual to bind the spirit and restore balance." I nodded, clutching the manuscript tightly as I began to read the ancient incantations. The words felt foreign on my tongue, their meaning elusive yet powerful. As we chanted, the shadows in the chamber seemed to grow, twisting and writhing like living things. A sudden gust of wind extinguished our lantern, plunging us into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for the matches, but my hands trembled too much to strike them. In the blackness, I heard a low growl, a sound that seemed to reverberate through my very bones. "Elena." Dr. Petrov's voice was urgent, his outline barely visible in the dim light. "It's here." A shape moved in the darkness, a shadow detached from the walls, its form shifting and undefined. It approached with a malevolent grace, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Fear clutched at my throat as I realized the spirit had taken form, its presence tangible and deadly. In a desperate bid to complete the ritual, I forced myself to continue the incantation, my voice steady despite the terror that clawed at my mind. The spirit hesitated, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. Dr. Petrov joined me, his voice rising in harmony with mine. Together, we poured our will into the words, determined to bind the spirit and save ourselves from its wrath. But the entity was powerful, its presence overwhelming, and I felt my resolve begin to waver. Just as the darkness threatened to consume us, the chamber was filled with a blinding light. The spirit recoiled, its form dissolving into wisps of smoke. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and I feared the tomb would collapse once more. As the light faded, silence fell over the chamber. The oppressive energy had lifted, replaced by an uneasy calm. We had succeeded in binding the spirit, but at what cost? The curse was far from broken, and the shadow of Timur's wrath still loomed over us. Exhausted and shaken, Dr. Petrov and I made our way back to the surface, the weight of our discovery heavy on our shoulders. The world outside had changed, the war raged on, and the fate of millions hung in the balance. Yet I knew that our true battle was far from over. The spirit may have been contained, but its influence still lingered. As I looked out over the city of Samarkand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something watched us from the shadows, a presence that would not rest until its vengeance was complete. And so, we prepared for the next chapter in our journey, knowing that the Curse of Timur was far from finished and that the true horror lay ahead. Our resolve was put to the test as we continued our journey through the desolate landscapes marked on Timur's map. Each site carried with it a weight of history, a palpable sense of dread that seemed to grow stronger the closer we came to its center. Dr. Petrov and I were driven by a desperate urgency, aware that the fate of the world hung in the balance. Our next destination was the ruins of a once great city, long since abandoned and swallowed by the sands of time. The city had been a jewel in Timur's empire, a place of wealth and power before it fell victim to his ruthless ambition. Now, it lay in ruins, haunted by the ghosts of its past. As we approached, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint cries of those who had perished here. I felt a chill creep into my bones, an ominous sense that we were not alone. The shadows of the city seemed to shift and change, figures moving in the corners of my vision only to vanish when I turned to look. Dr. Petrov and I set up camp amidst the crumbling buildings, the air heavy with the scent of decay. As night fell, I found myself drawn once more to the ancient texts we had brought with us. There had to be something we were missing, some clue hidden within the cryptic symbols and warnings. "Elena," Dr. Petrov said, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking about Timur's intentions. If the spirit was bound to him in life, it must have served a purpose beyond mere conquest." I nodded, considering his words. "You think he used it to maintain power?" "Exactly," he replied. "But what if there's more? What if the spirit was not just a tool, but a guardian of sorts? A force that protected his empire from external threats?" The idea made a twisted kind of sense. Timur had been a master strategist, always one step ahead of his enemies. Perhaps the spirit had been his secret weapon, a supernatural force that kept his empire intact. As we discussed the implications, a strange feeling came over me, a sense of being watched. I looked around, but saw nothing in the darkness beyond our campfire. Yet the sensation persisted, a prickling at the back of my neck that refused to go away. Determined to uncover the truth, we ventured deeper into the city, guided by the map and the faint glow of our lanterns. The ruins were a maze of crumbling walls and twisted alleyways, each turn revealing new horrors. The shadows grew thicker, their whispers louder, as if the city itself were alive, watching our every move. As we neared the center of the city, we stumbled upon a massive stone archway, its surface etched with the same symbols we had seen in Timur's tomb. A chill ran down my spine as I realized we had found what we were looking for, the heart of the curse. "This is it," Dr. Petrov said, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "The nexus of the spirit's power." I approached the archway, my heart pounding in my chest. The symbols seemed to pulse with an energy all their own, drawing me closer. As I reached out to touch the stone, a shock of cold ran through me, and I pulled back with a gasp. The ground trembled beneath our feet, a deep rumble that grew into a roar. The city came alive around us, shadows twisting and coiling like serpents. I could feel the spirit's presence, its malevolent gaze fixed on us as we stood at the threshold of its domain. Suddenly, the air was filled with an ear-splitting shriek, a sound that pierced my very soul. I clamped my hands over my ears, struggling to block out the noise, but it seemed to come from within, a scream that echoed in the depths of my mind. "Elena, look out!" Dr. Petrov shouted, pulling me back just as a massive stone pillar came crashing down, missing me by mere inches. The archway began to crumble, the symbols glowing with an unholy light as the spirit fought to break free. We stumbled back, desperation driving us away from the chaos. "We have to seal it," I shouted over the din, clutching the manuscript tightly. "We have to perform the ritual." Dr. Petrov nodded, his face pale with determination. Together, we began to recite the incantation, our voices rising above the cacophony. The spirit roared in defiance, its presence looming like a storm as we struggled to complete the ritual. The ground shook violently, cracks spider-webbing across the earth as the spirit's fury grew. The city itself seemed to tremble, the ruins collapsing around us as we fought to hold our ground. Just as it seemed the spirit would overwhelm us, a blinding light erupted from the archway, engulfing the ruins in its brilliance. The shadows recoiled, the air filled with the spirit's anguished wail as it was drawn back into the depths. The light faded, leaving only silence in its wake. The ruins lay still and empty, the oppressive energy dissipated. We had succeeded in sealing the spirit, but the cost had been great. As we stood amidst the rubble, I couldn't shake the feeling that the curse was far from over. The spirit had been contained, but its presence lingered, a dark shadow that hung over the world like a storm cloud. Dr. Petrov and I returned to camp, our minds heavy with the weight of what we had witnessed. The horrors of the past were etched into the land, and the spirit's influence would not be so easily erased. As I lay beneath the stars, the events of the night replayed in my mind, each image more vivid than the last. The shadows may have retreated, but I knew they were not gone. The spirit of Timur was a force beyond our understanding, and its true power had yet to be revealed. The battle was far from over, and the road ahead was fraught with danger and despair. The spirit's whispers haunted my dreams, a promise of vengeance yet to come. But as I closed my eyes, a new determination filled me. We would find a way to break the curse, to lay Timur's spirit to rest once and for all. And so, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, we prepared to face the horrors that awaited us, knowing that the true terror lay in the shadows yet to be uncovered. Leaving the cave behind, Dr. Petrov and I made our way back to civilization, exhausted but hopeful. We had managed to bind the spirit of Timur for now, but the knowledge of its lingering presence weighed heavily on us. Our return to Samarkand was marked by a sense of unease. Though the city seemed unchanged, the air felt different, charged with a tension that hinted at things unseen. The people went about their daily lives, unaware of the terror that had been averted, if only temporarily. As we settled into our quarters, I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if the horrors of the past weeks were finally catching up. I knew that we couldn't rest for long, the spirit was contained, but it was far from defeated. Dr. Petrov spent hours examining the relic, his eyes reflecting a mix of fascination and dread. The obsidian shard pulsed with a steady, dim light, a reminder of the power it contained. "We need to find a way to destroy it," he said, his voice grave. "As long as this relic exists, the spirit is not truly defeated." His words echoed in my mind, a reminder of the enormity of our task. We had bound the spirit, but the danger was far from over. If the relic were to fall into the wrong hands, the consequences would be catastrophic. Driven by the urgency of our mission, we began to search for a way to destroy the relic. Our research led us to an ancient text that spoke of a forbidden ritual, a ceremony that could shatter the bond between the spirit and the relic, destroying both in the process. But the ritual was dangerous, requiring a sacrifice that few would dare to make. It was a last resort, a gamble that could end in disaster if not executed perfectly. As we prepared for the ritual, the weight of our decision settled heavily on my shoulders. The world was poised on the brink of chaos, and our actions could tip the balance in either direction. On the night of the ritual, a storm rolled in, dark clouds blotting out the stars. The wind howled through the city, a mournful wail that seemed to echo the spirit's rage. The air was electric, charged with a palpable energy that set my nerves on edge. We gathered in a secluded courtyard, the relic placed at the center of a circle of ancient symbols drawn in chalk. The air was thick with tension, every breath a struggle as the storm raged around us. Dr. Petrov and I stood side by side, our hands clasped as we began to chant the incantation. The words felt heavy on my tongue, their power both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As the ritual progressed, the storm intensified, lightning flashing across the sky with blinding intensity. The relic pulsed with light, its glow growing brighter with each passing moment. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath our feet, a deep rumble that seemed to resonate through the very earth. The relic vibrated violently, its surface cracking as the spirit fought to break free. The air was filled with a cacophony of sound, the spirit's screams mingling with the roar of the storm. I felt a cold dread settle in my bones, the realization that we were on the edge of catastrophe. But just as it seemed the spirit would overwhelm us, a figure appeared in the shadows, a man, his features obscured by the storm. He stepped forward, his eyes locked onto the relic with a determination that sent a chill down my spine. "Elena," he called, his voice strong and steady despite the chaos. "It's time." Recognition flooded through me, and I knew who he was, the man whose presence had haunted my dreams, whose voice had whispered in the darkness. Timur. He stepped into the circle, his presence commanding and terrifying. The spirit's screams intensified, its rage palpable as Timur reached for the relic. "No!" Dr. Petrov shouted, moving to stop him. But I held him back, a strange understanding settling over me. "Wait," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and awe. "He's here to help." Timur grasped the relic, his expression one of grim determination. "I will not be controlled by this spirit any longer," he declared, his voice echoing with the power of centuries past. As he spoke, the storm seemed to calm, the air stilling as if holding its breath. The spirit roared in defiance, but Timur's will was stronger, a force that could not be denied. With a final surge of power, Timur shattered the relic, the shards exploding in a burst of light. The spirit's scream was cut short, its presence obliterated as the storm dissipated. Silence fell over the courtyard, the air clear and still. The danger had passed, the spirit defeated at last. But the cost had been great, and the weight of what we had witnessed lingered like a shadow. Timur turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "You have freed me from the curse," he said, his voice a whisper on the wind. "But the darkness will always linger. Guard against it, for it is never truly gone." With those final words, his form faded into the night, leaving us alone in the courtyard. The world felt different, the air lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. Dr. Petrov and I stood in silence, the enormity of what had transpired settling over us. The curse was broken, the spirit banished, but the memory of its power would remain. As we left the courtyard, I couldn't shake the feeling that Timur's words held a deeper truth. The darkness was always lurking, waiting for an opportunity to rise again. But for now, we had prevailed. The spirit was defeated, and the world was safe, if only for a time. As we returned to the city, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I felt a sense of hope, an understanding that even in the face of unimaginable horror, there was always a chance for redemption. The shadows had been banished, but the lessons we had learned would stay with us forever. The spirit of Timur was gone, but its legacy would live on, a reminder of the power of the past and the strength of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of evils.